I just appreciate that like rowdy pioneer, just rebel rouser attitude that it took back in the day to like make cool stuff happen.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 177, we have Emily Brown. Emily is a co-founder of the newly created Spearfish Trails Coalition, based in Spearfish, South Dakota. If you haven't been to the Black Hills in South Dakota, this place is truly remarkable. Spearfish has a history of trails and mountain biking that runs parallel with the history of mountain biking itself. Emily discusses the importance of this new coalition and why it is being formed now. Emily is also a field guide for SRAM, and SRAM happens to have an office in Spearfish. This means SRAM is also investing in trails and trail advocacy in their backyard. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. I would like to highlight another affiliate partner of the Trail Effect podcast, which is the Loam Pass. The Loam Pass is your one pass for 40-plus destination bike parks. When you purchase the Loam Pass, you get 2 days at each partner location, as well as an additional third day for half off. That means if you went on some epic road trip, you'd have over 80 days of access to some of the best bike parks, period. When you purchase your Loam Pass through the affiliate link found on the Trail Effect website or found in the show notes, you will receive free pass protection. Yes, that's right, free pass protection. And you'll be supporting the Trail Effect podcast as well. Some of the 40-plus destinations include Ride Rock Creek, Ride Canoga, Angel Fire Bike Park, the Keweenaw Adventure Company, Chestnut Mountain Resort, Jared's Place, Spirit Mountain, Marquette Mountain, Burke Mountain, Howler Bike Park, and many more. So click on the link provided for the Loam Pass, support the Trail Effect podcast, and get free pass protection. Thank you. Kettle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Kettle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Kettle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Kettle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Kettle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Emily Brown. How about that Jesse Melmid? Shred it.
It was pretty insane.
Yeah.
It's just like one of those videos that you watch and you're like, man, I gotta ride my bike better.
I know. And the fact that they had swollen members, like the Fuel Injected song, like that totally took me back over 20 years to VHS era.
An emotional,
videos.
just like it was just an emotional train ride. That's what it's doing its job.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. So I really appreciate when videos of that caliber come out and inspire you to do something with zero talking in it, just riding and music.
Yeah, I know. You sit there, like I was watching it and I was like, I've just had, this experience by riding on different trails and working on my suspension setup and doing all this fun stuff. And I'm just like, man, I got to get out there and like kick it up a notch. That looks fun, whatever he's doing.
And then figure out a way to get to BC, right?
Right. I can always figure out some way, but yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'll do a quick intro and we'll be off.
All right.
Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Emily Brown, who is the co-founder of the Spearfish Trails Coalition, which is a brand new trail coalition. And the reason why we're having her on today is so we can talk about what it's like to start a new trails coalition, but to also talk about spearfish in general, because I think a lot of people have heard of spearfish, but then there's a lot of people that haven't heard of spearfish. And I don't think people think of what spearfish is actually like when they think of South Dakota. It's a pretty rad community on the west side of the state that's very mountainous, and not everybody knows that. So how's it going today, Emily?
It's great. I'm excited to be chatting with you today. So thank you.
Yeah, you've got a brand new trail organization, and that's really exciting. We typically, I haven't featured very many brand new trail organizations, and I think like that's the most intriguing part about this is your journey into creating just that, a brand new trail organization. But let's get your backstory first, because you've been a mountain biker for quite a while. You have a deep history of mountain biking in your family.
It's in the blood. I always tell people I come from a long line of bike nuts. That's how I usually start out my introduction. So yeah, in terms of my journey into mountain biking, again, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but my aunt and uncle are Perry and Christy Jewett, who have been heavily involved in the bike scene for many, many years and have run one of our most popular regional races, at least the Dakota 5-0, for 25 plus years. So that has always been a part of my life. So our family would go ring cowbells. And my uncle has a deep, deep passion for bikes. And so it just spreads. So bikes were always in my peripheral. And then, going through high school, I dabbled in bikes, but had no friends who biked, knew absolutely nothing about biking. I can remember just kind of pulling, I'm sure, just random bike out of a garage and trying to ride property behind my parents' house. And that was kind of the extent. And then as I got into college, it was always a boyfriend or a guy friend that's like, dude, you should come biking with us. and as I'm sure that many women can probably relate to this experience, it usually meant they just threw me on some random bike. And now that I know way more about bikes, I'm sure it wasn't the right size. I'm sure nothing was worked on or fixed up. And the experience was always a little, maybe traumatic is too strong of a word, but I'm trying to follow them down the trail and wrecking and scraping and bruising and just feeling. Luckily, that always usually happens out of eyesight because they're so far ahead. So that was really most of my experience until my Aunt Christy at one point took me on a ride. And that was the first ride I have ever been on with another woman. And so she took me for a ride and we're riding along. We come to sort of like a technical rock section and she stops her bike and she looks back and she's like, you can just walk this part. I had no idea that was allowed. I had no clue. I was like, I can do what? She's like, yeah, part of mountain biking is just like walking and figuring out what you can ride and not ride. And she stayed super close to me and she was like encouraging. And it was such an awesome experience. Like that is, when I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to do this. And so then fast forward, getting married and moving to Colorado and I was dabbling in I got my first real mountain bike and dabbling in all that stuff. So I decided to sign up for the Dakota 5-0, which was a part of my family my whole life. But it's very, especially at that time, like 20 years ago, a 50-mile, lots of elevation gain. That was an incredible, intimidating task. So I sign up, I decided I'm going to ride it. And so those were the days back at the very beginning when Perry and Christy used to ride the race as a director because it was so small and so race day comes and I'm on my specialized stump jumper. Like I remember the bike and I start riding and, a ways into the ride, I catch up with Christy and she was riding with a group of her girlfriends. And I had never seen a group of women ride together before. They're all older than me, 10 plus years older than me. she had a gaggle of women and they were just enjoying their time at a bike. I just never had that experience. And I caught up with them and I felt so proud of myself. And I was just like, oh my God, like I thought they were so cool. And we kind of piggybacked the whole way. Like I'd meet up with them. They were like, hey, they were encouraging, they were giving me advice. And then they would kind of get in front of me and then I'd see them at an aid station. And we kind of bounced back and forth. And so at the very end of the race, there is, a long kind of gravel downhill, which is just like the minute you get to that part, you're just like, oh my God, I did this. So it's a struggle fest, that race. You get to the end, you see a long descent, downhill gravel descent, and I hop onto the gravel. And out in the distance, I see this like group of women and I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. There they are again. I'm riding along. And as time goes on, like I start I see like hand motions and I see all this stuff happening. I'm like, what's going on? And they had slowed down and they were waving me on. Like I kind of get emotional when I talk about it a little bit because it's a really powerful experience for me. They were waving me on. They're like, come on, come on. And so they ended up bringing me in, riding down with me for the rest of the race and taking me through the finish line together. Of course, I'm going to cry on a trails podcast. Why wouldn't you get emotional? So anyway, that experience just hooked me for always and ever. And so it was after I just felt so welcomed. I felt so empowered. I felt so proud of myself. And I also felt like super cool because this group of women were like letting me be a part of their experience in this ride. And so it was from that point on that I got more serious about my mountain biking. But I think more importantly, that is when mountain biking became mine as a person, as a woman, when it wasn't just my husband's thing that he's taking me on or some boyfriend or some guy. And it became like, this is mine and it belongs to me. And that was a really empowering experience. And then from there has been lots and lots of profound experiences along the way in that same realm.
I'm really glad you just shared that because I knew we were going to get on the topic of women specifically within this, but I didn't know we'd get it out of the gate.
Well, women usually get other women into mountain biking. So when typically, and not always, but when you ask a woman how she got into mountain biking, oftentimes it will have to do with other women in her life.
Yeah, it's a super awesome and powerful thing. And one thing we didn't intro you as, but you're also a field guide for SRAM. And I know, and this is kind of detouring a little bit, but we're gonna get back on track, I promise. I know because I've seen the social media posts that you do a lot of women specific stuff within your role. Maybe talk about how that story that you just said has kind of shaped what you're doing in the public with other women, whether it's a bike shop demo where you're teaching how to fix something or what all the other things that you do.
Yeah, I'll just start by explaining my role just for context of what people sort of understand I do in the world for SRAM. So I work for SRAM as a field guide, which basically means I'm kind of boots on the ground for SRAM. It's a cool role because if you look at SRAM as a company, it's a huge global company with thousands of employees. But I get the opportunity to work in my market and localize SRAM and integrate SRAM into communities. So that SRAM goes from this huge kind of corporate company to a very local invested experience. And so I like to think about it as like if SRAM was a person, like if the company was a person, like maybe the engineers would be the brain, like manufacturing the hands or whatever it is. And I really see the team of field guides as part of teams that are the heart of SRAM. So we do that I travel around to bike shops and I try to figure out how to support shops and how to get them stoked on SRAM products. So that can look like a traditional sort of rep role where we're selling product, educating, working out technical issues. But the cool part of it is it can look any way. So whatever cause or organization that a shop is passionate about, we can be passionate about too. We can do community events. We can do, rider education. It's just like whatever a shop says, it's like, this is what I need, or this is what I want. We get to help initiate on it. So that's what I get to do. And so within that role, a lot of what I have done with and for shops is women specific events. And I think just kind of this journey of getting into mountain bikes is showcasing why that is a really important experience for me. The bike industry can be very intimidating. And I think that creating events for specific reasons, for specific groups of people is a way to, maybe metaphorically do exactly what that group of women, it's a way of like pausing and like gesturing, like, come on in, like, come over here, and waiting and opening that opportunity. So the most favorite thing that I do in my job is working with women specifically.
And that puts you in so many different communities to be able to see exactly what we're going to continue to be talking about through this show.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about Spearfish as a community. There's a couple things when I went to Spearfish or even started learning about Spearfish for the first time, which obviously I'd heard of the Dakota 5.0, but I didn't know much about Spearfish beyond that. And one of the things that really stuck out to me with Spearfish specifically is the fact that you guys have your rec path, and that's been there for multiple decades. That's way ahead of its time in terms of how, shared use rec paths go within communities, especially the size of Spearfish.
It's really funny to me. I love that you use it's ahead of its time. Because in general, like maybe just in the Midwest or particularly in South Dakota, we always make jokes like we're 10, 20 years behind. So I was really using that, like that's so ahead of your time is cool. And it is true in that respect. We have the little town of Spearfish. It just holds a super special place in my heart. I grew up in the Black Hills and then spent a lot of time away from the Black Hills. And we tried desperately to get back to the Black Hills the minute that we left. And so in terms of things like the rec path that goes through town, it winds around like a creek through town. I lived in Boulder, Colorado for a big chunk of time. And it's very reminiscent of like when we lived in Boulder and then we moved back. And, riding along or running along the bike path, it feels very kind of, again, maybe feeling like a little bit ahead of the time as you look at that city as a very progressive, outdoorsy city. And I remember just kind of being like, oh, it's like that, but home. So yeah, there's a lot of qualities about Spearfish that make it just like a uniquely special place.
And you have multiple trail systems already that offer different experiences.
Yeah. What's really cool about Spearfish and the work that the people in Spearfish has done, Spearfish and the Black Hills, the whole Black Hills area is just a really outdoorsy community that brings with it sort of the Midwest attitude of just like getting in there and just getting it done. And so what we have is just this really big network of just your like purest, hand-built, like boots on the ground group of people in the middle of the night just chunking in trail from 30 years ago and created like a big network. So I would say in terms of like the beloved types of trails that most people many, many years ago started riding on and what kind of grew this like, whoa, you can ride your bike on the dirt in the mountains, we still have those same trails that I think elicit like a really cool kind of emotional, sentimental response when people ride them. I will get into, but trails are changing. Trail development has changed. Types of trails are changing. And I love it and I'm here for it. And, for the most part, most people, they're fun trails. But there is something emotional that happens when you get on those trails that existed, that started this movement of what we now see as trails. And so what is really special at Black Hills is that that's mostly what we have around here. And so it's a really cool place.
Well, in the proximity to the actual national forest, like you can ride right from downtown. And it could be a mountain bike ride. You have exceptional gravel riding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's not a ton of communities that offer that experience.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the hills. Can I just talk about this in general so that people understand? I really like to, I just was traveling in Washington and kind of working with other field guides, and they would introduce me and they'd be like, this is Emily. She's a field guide based out of South Dakota. And I was like, man, no, you got to ease that into the conversation. That's, you don't just come out of the gates with she's from South Dakota, because most people, boom, something comes into their mind that's not necessarily a true a showcase of what the place that I live. And so the Black Hills is kind of this area within South Dakota that is sort of, South Dakota is, for the most part, has a lot of prairies and plains, and there's beautiful like reasons to love and enjoy that. But then there's this pocket of hills in the middle of all of that. And so one of the races that Perry and Christy from Ridge Riding puts on is they call the Pine Island. And the reason they call it the Pine Island is because we are sort of this island of forest and hills and, this amalgam of different kind of landscapes within South Dakota. So Spearfish is located at 4,000 feet. And our largest peak in the Black Hills, Black Elk Peak, is like 7,300 feet. So we've got elevation. You can go on a bike ride and you can hit all kinds of different experiences within. So you can start, kind of in like open, exposed places where you can see for miles and miles, and then you'll drop down and there'll be just floors of just ferns, like very reminiscent of like the Pacific Northwest. There's you'll get into like thick forest where it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, but you're not. There's creeks and springs running through everywhere. So it's also very well known for the rock climbing, fly fishing, and there's all kinds of kind of world-class recreational activities that takes place right here in like a very like sacred spot in the Black Hills.
Yeah, I know when I came home from that trip I made out your way last summer, I came back and I told people, I'm like, there's literally thousands of feet of elevation there. And they kind of look at you like, really? It's like, and granted, there are some people that have, really gone out the Dakota 5-0 and understand what it's like. But if you haven't been there, it's tough to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's a pretty special place.
It is. And you guys also have, I'm going to say 3 different trail systems essentially right now. And one being your Black Hills National Forest, the other one being Lookout Mountain. Lookout Mountain, I look at it like it's more of a city park type of trail system, because it kind of is that. And then you have your beginner skills area, which is really the cool thing about that more than anything is it's on the rec path. Mm-hmm. It's like next to a campground, and it's so accessible.
Yeah, there's so many good things that we have going for us in our town, and the not just what we have, but I think the other thing that I just loved when you did come out and spend time in Spearfish is like this place, maybe because I grew up here, maybe because it's freaking amazing. I've always just loved this place. And like, I remember like out of high school doing leadership training in like the Himalayas, right? I was like trekking through the Himalayan mountains, and everyone was like, this is breathtaking. I was like, it's cool, but I don't know if you've ever been to the Black Hills. Like that's how much I love this place. And so when I think about trails and when I think about the work that, I'm starting to do in this area, I see so much. And when you came and spent the week there, you said one thing to me. You were just like, man, at one point you said, this place has so much potential. We could be working here for the next 20 years. And that was so impactful for me, because I've always believed that about this area, but you never know if you just like have this weird attachment or if you're seeing things differently. So paired with the things we do have with the trail systems, this little pocket of area right by the campground, and then pair what we have already, and then overlay that with the potential of what could be. It's just like super exciting and mind blowing.
Well, and what's interesting is like you already have pieces of all the ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And so like adding more to those ingredients isn't like trying to sell a new concept.
No.
Right? You have the camping, outdoor people love to camp. You have the national forest. You have the open spaces, and you have like a really good metro area is a bad word because I'm not going to say it's
not
bad.
Metro.
I'm not going to say it's but you have a really good downtown. Like it has soul.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is the Black Hills. And when I talk about the Black Hills, Spearfish is kind of nestled in like the northern part of the Black Hills. And then, there's a wide swath of kind of what we consider the Black Hills, Rapid City. And there's more like a southern Black Hills. So when I say Black Hills, we're already set up with the tourism infrastructure. A lot of like our economy, we have the Sturgis bike rally and like we have things. So we already have an appreciation for and an infrastructure for tourism in the state as well. So it really is like a perfect amalgam. It just needs some like energy.
That's a perfect segue into the Spearfish Trails Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the need or your desire and the people that you're working with. Because when I introed you as co-founder, there's a handful of people within Spearfish that you're working together with on this. What were some of the driving points behind organizing this coalition?
So this kind of all got orchestrated through my role at SRAM. I get to do a lot of networking and sort of meet a lot of people, and also hear about a lot of things happening across the state and see what other places are doing. And in that, there's always this like, oh, that's so cool, like that's going on. And while we have this incredible system of trails and this incredible group of people who dedicate so much time and energy to what we have in the Black Hills, it just felt like any big kind of new things were kind of stagnated. Like there's little things here and there, but I guess I kind of got FOMO a little bit in terms of like, man, like there's stuff happening and like, I want that stuff to happen here. But I haven't been a part of the history. And I think that's a thing to point out too, is I'm not a part of all of the ways that this places have been developed. And so I just kind of met the right people. Uriah from Benchmark Trails reached out to just kind of network and talk about just biking in general. And he kind of laid out for me, like in that conversation, I was like, this is so cool. And like, how are you getting this done? And he just seemed like a real go-getter. And that was the first time that someone was like, that someone essentially explained to me what like sort of the realm of modern trail building and the process that you go through. And that was to me when he's like, well, you start here and then you do this and then you do this and and to me, I was like, okay, well, I can work with that. Like, because it just, at least you have a structure with what you can work in. Beyond that, I was like, who would I talk to? Like, where would I don't know. And so I was like, well, I can work with that. And so I took sort of that structure that he explained to me, which I now understand as kind of like the model that IMBA uses and the model that, lots of trail building communities are using. And I just try to take bites at it. So met with people who were already in trails, working in trails and trails organizations, and kind of got the ball rolling on a project. Like, let's just start working on a project, not really with the intention to start an organization, but it became very clear as we were moving forward in the project that there needed to be an entity, a sole entity dedicated to just this area, just Spearfish locally, to do this work and push it forward. So that is why we decided to just start a brand new trails organization in Spearfish.
This is where we go back into your guide role.
Mm-hmm.
You travel quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
You've been to some other communities. I'm gonna list a couple of those communities.
Mm-hmm.
Cuyuna, which is like Ironton, Crosby, northern Minnesota. Duluth.
Mm-hmm.
You've been to Duluth more than once.
Yep.
And then one that many people might not have heard about, but is going to get on their radar sooner than they know, Mason City, Iowa.
Yep.
All those communities took the steps that you're talking about, or are in the middle of taking those steps.
Yeah. And that was also traveling to Duluth and Cuyuna in particular. And then, I didn't add Iowa City till later, but I was just like, this is amazing. Like, and that is where I kind of like, and I started talking to trails orgs. So I was just like, how is this happening? Like, how is so much happening all the time? Because like you talk to the people in Duluth and it was like, oh, ride all the trails. I love the trails. And then it's like, oh yeah, and then we got this going on. Then we got this going on. We're trying to get this parcel of land and we're trying to connect this and this. And I'm like, how's all this going on? This is so cool and insane. And so, yeah, it's like just traveling to those places and just seeing like all the things that they're perpetually working on was like, oh, I want to do that. And I want to do this in this place that I'm just like love so much and I'm so passionate about. So yeah, like traveling around played a key role in just recognizing the intense amount of work that goes into it, but just like the outcome that can come from it.
So speaking of intense amount of work, what are some lessons you've learned so far since going from, I'm going to say like basically ground zero of not having a trail org to now having a trail org? Like what are some of the key steps that you maybe didn't know about or things you did know about that maybe were a heavier lift than may have been advertised or that you thought of?
Everything. And I would like to point out the fact that, we are just still baby. We're like newborn baby, depending on nourishment from other mama organizations and people who know more than us. So I would say that it's all been pretty overwhelming, but figure outable. And so I can talk more about sort of the stage that we're in, which is still very beginning. But I would say some of the things that have been sort of most challenging is the balancing act of honoring and appreciating and naming and recognizing like all of the people who have come before and all of the work that has done before. And recognizing that, like, I wasn't a part of that. Like, I didn't put my blood, sweat, and tears into what we have now. And so appreciating that and holding a space for that, but also like pushing a new approach, something different, and, something with a different structure forward. And I knew that was always going to be a balancing act, but it really has been emotionally a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because I think by the nature of someone coming in, it's like, who's this girl? Like, who are you even? Coming in and proposing this kind of new plan or idea, it can inherently, even though it's not meant to, feel like a criticism to the people who have done it a certain way and who are still doing it and who have put so much into it. And so there can be tension, a bit of tension. And so just navigating that and trying to find the right words and trying to use a language that expresses that has been, it's taken more of an emotional toll than I thought it would. And then this is, again, maybe not what you're going for, but in initiating this and pushing it forward and trying to figure it all out, I think just dealing with me personally, like an insane amount of imposter syndrome, of just feeling like this idea of like, who am I? And I don't know anything. I think traditionally, sort of in these roles or in these communities or in this industry, there's been a certain group of people, or it's like looked a certain way. And yeah, I deal with a lot of like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? I have no skill, just like you kind of move through that like shame spiral of imposter syndrome a little bit as well. So, and that's just on a personal kind of mental, emotional state of working through and pushing this forward. So those are, I mean, that's maybe not what you were going for, but I would say those are the two things that come up really often in putting this organization together and trying to kind of rally this project moving forward.
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, you're not alone. Imposter syndrome is real.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that you are recognizing that there was a lot that has gone on prior to you taking this role over. And I look at it a lot where I live too, where like all this stuff didn't just show up one day. It didn't just fall out of the sky. Like there was a lot of people doing whatever they could do to make whatever happen to get us to this point. And I think generally speaking, there isn't enough celebrating of that. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I wouldn't even know that a trail was possible. You know what I mean? Like I just wouldn't even know that it was possible had people like Perry and, there's Jesse Hansen who owns Rushmore Bikes. And like, they were there like when bikes were pretty much a new idea. And if they hadn't been here just rowdy, just like kind of a rowdy group of people just out in the woods doing like the perception of just like, what are they doing? If they hadn't been doing that, like I wouldn't have even known you could ride a bike on the dirt. It's like, it's almost easier now. Like we have like a structure and a system and I can like hop in and like all the moving parts, but they really were the people who saw something cool and exciting and were on the forefront back in the day of like, this is something people can do in the woods and we're going to make it happen in our area. So I really want everyone to know and understand that like there is deep appreciation and gratitude for that work that's been done. And they still continue to do it to this day.
Yeah. I mean, back then in that era, people didn't really know what mountain bikes even were in a lot of places. Now you have things like NICA, which has really opened up people's eyes to what mountain biking is because it's had a ripple effect in terms of like getting kids and families and extended families and friends and relatives, all the things into mountain biking. It's an Olympic sport now. The era that you're talking about, mountain biking wasn't an Olympic sport. And that was a long time ago. That was 1996.
Yeah.
So that's almost 30 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
So they were true pioneers.
Oh, true. And it takes just like a rowdy, sort of like rebellious, sort of just like attitude that it's funny because the very attitude that it took, to be like, well, I'm going to do this random thing and I'm going to get out there and like get a shovel and sort of be rebellious and kind of rule breaker or whatever. That's the very attitude that doesn't get you that far right now. Do you know what I mean? And so because of just how things have shifted and evolved, it's like the very reasons why they were so successful at like just making so much happen now are the kind of the attitudes that don't get us quite as far anymore. So it's like, I just appreciate that like rowdy pioneer, just rebel rouser attitude that it took back in the day to like make cool stuff happen.
Yeah. One of the other steps you've taken, and a lot of people have really benefited from this step, is you went to an IMBA Trail Labs and you went to one in Cedar City. So I'm completely jealous because I went to the one in Bentonville, and Bentonville's rad, but I think
Bentonville. Oh, that's so lame.
I think Cedar City like is a whole different perspective. And I actually am glad that the one that you went to was was in Cedar City because it's probably more relevant for what you're trying to do.
Yeah. But number one mistake with Trail Labs was not traveling with a bike. That was my big mistake. Yeah, I got to go to, actually SRAM supported me in going to IMBA Trail Labs, and it was a really important time of me just absorbing just a ton of information. But also it was just like a really important time for me to show up in a trail building capacity. At that point, I wasn't even moving in the direction of kind of organizing a completely separate nonprofit. But I got to sit in the room, and I got to have a seat at the table, and I got to sort of pretend, like play trail builder. Like I'm not a trail builder. I just play one on TV. Like that's kind of what it felt like. But I learned so much from that experience. It was really vital part of what continues to roll out today.
I just noticed yesterday, and it was official, I think yesterday, that Spearfish Trails Coalition is now a part of the IMBA local program. Maybe for those that aren't aware of what the IMBA local program is, maybe you could provide what it is from your perspective, because it's something I'm sure you had to learn about before you decided to just sign up, right?
For sure, a little bit, but here's the thing. It all kind of works together because I work for SRAM. SRAM works really closely with IMBA. I got a lot of kind of my initial like insight and training. I got to, like, over the last Dakota 5-0 meet Kent McNeil and like, have an hour-long conversation with him before this was like right at the beginning of everything. So to some extent, IMBA was like a no-brainer in terms of how we would organize. And it was, even without kind of fully understanding it, just knowing that I personally, and we as an organization, need support and we need a guide. And that to me is how I saw IMBA. IMBA is involved with a lot of really successful projects. And regardless of what that looks like, how we work together or understand it, like that, I want to have that guidance. And so from day one, part of the reason why we formed a new org was just our desire to be an IMBA chapter. So we just got to kind of localize IMBA and an IMBA local chapter. So members of IMBA, and that was kind of a no-brainer for me in the development of this organization.
And one of the things that we maybe didn't point out, and it's not totally relevant in your role because you're a field guide and could be located in a different place, but SRAM actually has an office in Spearfish.
Yep.
Which is separate from your role.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, a little known fact is that, SRAM has an office in Spearfish, South Dakota, which just is so mind blowing and cool. But yeah, essentially Quark, the power meter company, was founded by a local Black Hills guy. And and that was acquired by SRAM, I think maybe over 10 years ago now. And when that was acquired by SRAM, they kept the facilities there and has fostered now, then it was like production and all power meter focused. And then since then, now we have about 55 people based in Spearfish out of SRAM. And all of those 55 people do completely different things within SRAM, all the way from like engineering to me as a field guide to customer service. So that's a pretty good asset to the Spearfish community as well.
It is. And other assets to the Spearfish community are the actual Spearfish community and the support that or partnership, I should say, is probably a better word, that you have with working with your local Parks and Recs department and whatnot. So let's talk about how this intertwines with local units of government.
Oh yeah, man, that's been the best part, is that, as with most things in life, everything is all about timing. And whether or not, I know that a lot of people have tried to push projects forward and have tried to make things happen. And in terms of local governments and in terms of representatives, it has gotten shut down or may not have worked out. But we are in a moment in time in Spearfish where we have nothing but full support from the city of Spearfish and the Parks and Rec department. And so the working relationship is like pure joy and is also a result of the work that lots of people have done to get us to this point. So when we first initially, I think, through the advice of, I think, Rock Solid and then other people that we were in conversation with, it's like starting in the city and on city property is sort of like low hanging fruit. It's the way that we're going to get the most work done in the quickest amount of time. And so as soon as we approached the city and started having conversations, I mean, we just started to have regular meetings with the city. And when we proposed a concept plan, when we had this like formal, professional concept plan done and we sat it on the table, they were blown away. And they were like, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. We have been waiting for an organization or a group of people to come to us with a well thought out, well defined plan, and also a plan of action of how to initiate it, aside from just trying to get the city to give us a ton of money. And so they were just like, we've been waiting for this moment. And so it's just been an awesome working relationship. And I get to learn all kinds of things about the city and kind of like work in that realm, which is super cool. I get I have regular meetings with the superintendent of the Parks and Rec department, and we just stay in touch and we just keep the project moving forward as best we can.
Well, and a very interesting comment that came out of meeting your parks director, Tyler, is that he's very open in the fact that he's not a mountain biker.
Yeah.
But he recognizes that mountain biking and outdoor activity in general is kind of the future of his role across, and other people in his role across the country and even across the world.
I think that's what I kind of love most about the working relationship. Like, of course, you want everyone to be a mountain biker and, like there's some level of, connectedness through that. But I kind of love the fact that he's not a mountain biker and that, and also side note, when we talk about trails, for sure, obviously we're talking about mountain biking, but also we want to consider other trail users as well and make it an experience that everyone can enjoy. But I do love the fact that he's not a mountain biker, but still really sees and appreciates the value of trails. So I think that brings it different. And then, some of the people that work under him, of course, are mountain bikers. And so we've just got, so we have kind of the best of both worlds in terms of the staff at the city right now.
I think it's important to have people from all different backgrounds, and the fact that he was just really open about that. A lot of times people like to push their pet projects forward, and for him, this isn't that.
Yeah. And I think he kind of recognizes, maybe he's even said it. I think he's said this before, but he kind of recognizes like this is sort of the legacy he wants to leave. Not everybody who works in government, or like I said, even in this sort of region, this little region of the nation, like have a really kind of forward thinking, sort of progressive view of things. There can be a lot of like, this is how we've always done things and this is how we'll continue. There's a lot of kind of that attitude in this part of the world a little bit. And so what a gift to have someone who is forward thinking, to know that like, this is kind of the legacy I want to leave from my role and my work in the city.
When you commented about the city properties being some of the low hanging fruit, and another benefit of that is you want to expand access for new users and beginners. And that's something that we're seeing time and time again within the trail world, is that there's a lot of legacy stuff out there that doesn't really cater to new users. And to lower that barrier of entry so we can get more people involved and provide different experiences for them is super important. And so that was a super awesome breath of fresh air that has come out of Spearfish as well. And maybe you could expand on that from your perspective and being the boots on the ground and seeing people trying to get into mountain biking there.
I take my kids as case in point for proving this point. Right now, I have a 12 and a 14-year-old who do not bike. And I think mostly it's rebellion against me. Fair enough. But we have a lot of blue trail here. I would say that the majority of our trail they're like a blue trail. And there's a bit of type 2 fun involved in biking out here. It feels like all you do is climb. And then, there's no kind of like long descents or necessarily like playful features and ways to, there's not a whole lot of ways to leap together, like short laps and things like that. So my kids don't really like biking because it's like kind of a sufferfest, no matter what trail. And there are some solutions to that. But we would take a family trip every year to Bentonville, and that's when they get their bikes out. And that's when they don't fight us to go on a bike ride. It's literally like every year we dust off their bikes, go to Bentonville, they have a blast, and we come home. So to me, having opportunities for people to enjoy riding a bike when they're starting out, because not everyone's going to be like me who has a horrible experience but just keeps on going. And horrible experience is a strong word, but just accessible. And I think a really important experience for people to have is for this idea of like, I can do this and I do belong here, because I think you see a mountain biker and you're like, oh, they're this kind of person and like they do this kind of thing. And that's awesome, but I don't think that's me. And if you can get them on a trail and they can have the experience, this little tiny seed of like, oh, maybe I can do this. That's really powerful. And that's what I want people to experience. But then on the other side of that, I also really, really want to have a spectrum of trail on the other side too. I want the opportunity for people to continue to grow their skills and to continue to challenge themselves and continue to brush up against that part of themselves where they discover a deep courage and like pull out inside of them something they never thought possible. So to me, to have a spectrum of trail experiences is the ultimate goal.
That comment came through multiple times through various people when I was there last summer. There is multiple people that had mentioned, and this is at totally different times, that were going to go to Trestle Bike Park, or they had just gone to Trestle Bike Park, or they wanted like an experience like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can kind of see too, which I find kind of interesting of like the culture in Spearfish. Spearfish is a very cross-country oriented riding style. It's like good old-fashioned cross-country riding and ride fast and hard and suffer, which I love. It's like such a cool experience, but that has been like a very core part of our culture. But then I would say, we moved back, my family moved back, I think 6 years ago. And since we moved back, you just see this kind of pocket of people starting to travel more and more. You see them taking their family to this place, and you see them going to that place, and you see pictures of them doing this thing. And to me, that was kind of that first indicator that like there is a desire for the community here in Spearfish to kind of like have different experiences and just different riding styles and just the ability to ride a different style bike. And so, yeah, when you saw everyone start to travel, it was kind of, for me, this sort of indicator of like, people are interested in a spectrum of experiences.
I'm going to thank bike manufacturers, component manufacturers for that starting to happen to some degree, because bikes have changed a lot in that time frame too. And so you have a lot better pedaling, trail and enduro or gravity orientated bikes, which are allowing people to get out of what traditionally was that cross-country mindset, right?
Oh, bikes are so fun and cool. Yeah.
Let's talk about SRAM, and not from a component perspective, but from a company perspective and what they're doing in terms of you're really giving back to the trail community. Because that's a story that not everybody hears.
Yeah. A part of what has been a huge piece of anything that's happening in Spearfish happening is because of the support of SRAM. And not only in the support of, the stuff that I'm working in the trails world for Spearfish is separate from my job. It's not part of my job. I don't get paid to do it. But SRAM is very supportive of me, meetings during the day, or, they like to see people that work for the company really involved in their communities in this way. So that's the first way that they have supported this. The second way is they actually gave a chunk of money for us to get started, not only with paying for a couple of zones to get their concept plans. They helped pay for that, but they also gave us a chunk of money for our insurance, because we had zero money in our bank account. And so in order to become an IMBA chapter, we had to pay for insurance. And so they paid for insurance so we could become an IMBA chapter. And part of the reason why is because they do have an initiative from an advocacy standpoint that they want to be more invested and involved in trails and communities, which they would call in their backyard, meaning the places where they have offices, right? The places where they have the most employees and community members out enjoying those places. So they want to invest in those areas. And just lucky for us, Spearfish is SRAM's backyard by nature of there being an office there. So that's one. And then the advocacy priorities that SRAM has, they have 3 advocacy priorities that they've kind of stated. And it's they want to invest in more trails close to home. They want to invest in safe infrastructure, and they want to invest in community and rider inclusivity. And so what we're doing in Spearfish, I've been working with the advocacy, Rob Capucci, who heads up the advocacy, and he is very excited about using SRAM as a catalyst to start projects in particular. The seed money that tends to be the stuff that's really, you want a grant, or you want money, or you want to do this thing. And when you're just starting out, it's like, oh, well, what projects have you done? Or put this and this in the grant. And there's all of these hurdles. And also nobody wants to pay for the results being a piece of paper full of stuff. People want to pay for what results in a fun trail riding. But part of the process is you got to pay for that plan. And so because of kind of SRAM has watched this evolve and has been very supportive and integrated in it the whole time, it's inspired them to think about using their advocacy money in the same way in other places, as less of maybe fully supporting this trail org who's now at the point where they're just kind of building one trail at a time, or they're more evolved, and to just think about how can we support those areas, those places, those organizations that just need the help getting started, getting off the ground. So that's been a cool result of them sort of watching the process of Spearfish Trails Coalition coming together.
Well, could you imagine if that new derailleur started out with just starting to forge components out of metal and plastic and carbon instead of starting on paper?
Right. It's it obviously it makes sense in every other realm, but there's just something about building a trail. And, and I get it because it's such a component of all of these parts of our human spirit that comes together all at once when we're out there building a trail. It's grit and dirt and this part of ourselves that we're being useful, and it's community, and it's seeing a project being done. It's seeing results. It's being inspired. The trail building I understand why people just want to go there. That's the fun stuff. That's the meat. That's the joy. That's the sauce, you know? Nobody likes sitting behind a computer and like writing a grant or, you know, making a plan. But it is that very thing that is going to make that building phase even more exponentially enjoyable and beneficial and successful in the long run.
One of the other things you've been able to do, and I believe this maybe was a result of SRAM, maybe not, is you went to the Sturdy Dirty. I always mix those words up, but I believe it's a Sturdy Dirty, which is a women's...
Sturdy Dirty.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a women's specific enduro. And, you know, you started out this conversation talking about the impact of being able to ride with your aunt and others at your first Dakota 5.0 and how that felt for you. And then just recently you went to the Sturdy Dirty, which was kind of like the next level of that, right?
Yeah, it's like that. It's my experience on the trail 20 years ago doing the 5.0, and it's the seed of that. It's the product of that tiny little experience that I had with those women motioning me to come and join them long ago. And it's that very seed that has, resulted in events like the Sturdy Dirty. I was just there as a shearer. I got to go through SRAM, and SRAM ran an aid station there. So I got to go participate in it. I was more just like a fly on the wall, you know, because it's outside of my market and I don't have a lot of relationship in that area. So I was just like a pure visitor in that realm. And so I more or less just got to watch it all happen. So for those, just more context, the Sturdy Dirty has been going, and that was their 10th anniversary. It's an all women's enduro that I think it's like 300 or 400 riders, and the event sells out in like 45 seconds or something insane. So it's all women riding enduro. It's a party. It's inspiring. Like, yeah, it is my experience at the 5.0 on steroids, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. It is 400 women like opening their arms and like saying like, come on, come on. There's just nothing like it.
Was there any key takeaways that you had from that maybe you'll incorporate with your role either at SRAM or stuff that you'd like to do within this Spearfish Trails Coalition?
Outside of like the women specific events, enduro, I know enduros people have been doing them forever. They're very popular in other parts of the country, but not so much in this area. And I am in love with that format. Like the idea of the format of that style of an event, it just totally excited me. And part of the reason that it did was because it can be so many different things, but it's this marriage of these two. So what I think is happening is, you know, in moving this Spearfish Trails Coalition forward, what we're doing is kind of bringing this like legacy and like honoring this legacy and appreciating all of this, and then taking it and weaving in sort of like a new perspective and a new trail experience and a new style, and seeing the way that those overlap and weave together. And to me, the enduro represented is like a physical manifestation of what's happening in our area. Because in that enduro, this was wild, is that the women who were riding like the expert and the pro level, they, at the end of the day, they got over like 40 miles in and like 4,000 feet of climbing. I think in our minds, and especially in this area, we value so much the like grit, like getting there and making it hard, and like downhill, even though downhill is very physically challenging, downhill's like, you can't just ride downhill. Well, you know, more and more people now are wanting more like pure kind of downhill experiences. And so for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, this marries what like the cross country vibe like loves, is that like grit and climbing, and you can overlap that with then like the downhill kind of like vibe and experience. And so to me, that style of a race just was this like manifestation of what I feel like I'm experiencing happening on a more metaphorical level in Spearfish. So I love the idea of an enduro event.
Yeah, I'm glad you described it that way, because that's exactly why I transitioned out of cross country racing, because I still really enjoy a long day on the bike. And I wanted to continue to have a long day on the bike and have a reason to train to have a long day on the bike and have a reason for riding long. But a really long enduro, like you just said, 4 or 5 hours, it's a long day on the bike, but it's a whole different vibe and it's a lot more fun.
It's a whole different vibe too. And as a person who runs a lot of aid stations as part of my job as well, I love the idea of an enduro because people aren't just whipping through aid stations like they would, it's like because they're getting timed for the whole event. So they're like, my job typically when I support an aid station around here is I'm like, I'll get you water. I'll shove this food in your mouth. Like, here, go, go, go. Like it's like that is kind of the experience of, not everyone's like that, but you do have the people that hang out. But on an enduro, people are hanging out at your aid station. They're putting their bikes down, they're taking their helmet off, they're stretching. And so the thing that's really cool about the Sturdy Dirty is that every aid station is an experience. And all of the people who ran the aid stations, and I got to be there with SRAM, put intense amount of thought, intense amount of work into how can I make this a fun experience. So I love that is so conducive to community building. In racing is intimidating in and of itself, but if you can do that, and then at the same time, you're having these really great experiences with people along the way that a lot of times in races, you just end up by yourself, but in an enduro style race, you get to like really dig in with the people around you.
And you just use that word community, and this is totally unscripted, right?
No.
And it's the perfect segue into the question that I ask all of my guests, well, almost all my guests. I don't ask everybody, but I'd say 95% of my guests. And that is, what are the things that you look for in it? And I want you to get truly selfish. But what are the things that you look for in a trail community? It could be someplace you want to travel to. It could be what you want to do in Spearfish. Just like, what are the key ingredients in your own selfish? I want to say selfish because sometimes people don't answer selfishly. And I want like selfish answers. Like, what are the things that you truly want in a mountain bike community?
Well, what's really important to me is, so if I could, if I was like, so you can move anywhere you want to move to, and you get to bring your family, you get to bring all your friends, you get to keep your job. I would visit, places that has extensive trail systems. Like I'm talking like every day I wake up and I have the opportunity to pick from like a huge spectrum of like what I want to ride that day. So that would be number one. And then number two, but most importantly, I would go into those communities and I would spend time in, the coffee shops and the breweries and the restaurants and like whatever local events they had. And it would be the reception from the people in the community. If the people in the community are like, oh, you're here to ride your bike. Oh my gosh, there's this group ride tomorrow. You should join it. Or like, hey, we're doing this thing down there. Come and join this. Oh, have you ridden this thing? That the community was not only stoked on their trails, but they were stoked on you being there to ride their trails. And not only stoked on you being there to ride their trails, but they wanted to like make sure that you had the best experience. Again, everything goes back to my moment with the women welcoming in, motioning me to come and join them. I want to have that feeling when I go into a trail community. And that to me is like the sauce right there. And I know they exist because I travel around and I have that experience in communities. Not all of them, but there are some communities that are that excel. They're especially phenomenal of like just bringing you, folding you in to what is happening in their world. So to me, that is how I would choose a trail community.
That's perfect. I like it. How do you want to wrap this one up? Is there any kind of closing comments, parting words, anything that you want to throw out there to leave with the listener that hasn't been said already? You've said a lot and it's been all super awesome. And you're like, this is good.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've missed too much other than just, I guess the encouragement would be to people who have maybe feel like they're on the periphery. Like maybe they feel like they're on the outside looking in, but they're either A, they're seeing really cool things happen, or B, they want really cool things to happen, but they don't know where to start, or they don't feel like they're equipped, or they don't feel like they're the right person. I think if you have that little feeling inside of you that maybe makes your heart beat a little bit faster or makes you jealous, like jealousy is a really great determining factor of like something that you might want to be doing. If you have any of those emotions, my encouragement would be to just start conversations with people and pursue it. Like everything is figure outable. And like, if you are excited and you want to contribute, there is something for everyone. And you don't have to know anything. There is not a certain amount of knowledge you have to have before you start. Everything's figure outable and you'll learn it along the way. So don't hesitate and don't miss out on the opportunity to be a part of something big and or small. And another thing that I would add is that, I view trails as just a great asset to a recreational community. But for me, trails, they're so much more than that. They have the power to change political structures within towns and city. They have the power to build community. They have the power to advocate. They have the power to solve problems that community might be experiencing. I see the trails as this huge, powerful experience. When I grew up, if there was any ailment that I had, like a headache or a sore knee, my mom would always be like, you need to drink more water. The problem is you don't drink enough water. And I feel like I'm like that with trails. if there's anything happening in a town or a community or a person or whatever, I'm like, you need more trails. You just need to build some trails. Like, because to me, that's the power of trails. So my encouragement is to get in there and become a part of it because it's an enriching, profound experience.
Well, there you have it. Dr. Emily Brown just prescribed trails to everybody.
I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV.
Yes. Well, Emily, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and talking trails so more people can learn about spearfish and learn about what you have going on and hopefully get inspired to do the very same thing in their communities, or at least get involved.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the opportunity to come on, even though, it felt like I don't really know that much, but thank you for showcasing, people at the beginning of their journey and showcasing, the process. A lot of the guests that you have are kind of icons. And so I appreciate you, taking the time and having the perspective to highlight, people on the other side of that as well.
That was always the goal.
Awesome.
And I didn't even know icons at the beginning. So it had to be the goal.
Well, you've done good.
So I appreciate that, Emily. Thank you very much for coming on the Trail Effect podcast.
Thanks for having me.
If you're looking for ways to support the Spearfish Trails Coalition, you can head directly to their website at www.spearfishtrails.org and join as an IMBA local member. Or you can donate directly through their GoFundMe Kickstarter campaign. Links for these options can also be found in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dojustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.